Thanks everyone for coming. Today we're going to offer you our perspectives on managing customizations. So my name is Katie Rudd, and I'm a former Apttus customer. Robert and Jeff will introduce themselves here in a moment and share their thoughts on our topic today. Now, as we all know, there's multiple ways that you can solve a business problem. And as a core practice, we always recommend that you start with out-of-the-box tools and solutions. However, if not, obviously there's extensions as we show here. And then of course, there's customizations. Now, if you need to go down the customization path, we highly recommend that not only do you look at integration impacts, but also any downstream implications, but more importantly, any total cost of ownership of your customization that you're doing or that you're considering. Now, since we're here to talk about customizations, we're going to hear from Robert about the primary ways in which we've seen this in practice. Robert?
Yep, absolutely. So hey folks, I'm Robert Garcia and I'm with the Apttus Business Transformation team. And I work with a wide variety of customers that have owned and lived and breathed in owning these application systems for years on end. And one of the things that we've done is by talking with our customers, we've uncovered quite a number of different motivations for applying customization into the system. So whether it's, there's some situations where it's okay and there's some situations where it really isn't. So as an organization, we see customers apply customization in the scenario where they're applying them for sake of end user convenience, saving clicks, or maybe even the convenience of some of the downstream systems. But over the years, as the customizations begin to stack up and accumulate, we see a patchwork approach, we see some improvised solutions, we see IT turnover, and we also see the need for admin heroics and the MacGyver approach as you kind of work through putting Band-Aids on stuff and applying some of those customizations, or even trying to unpack those customizations, which sometimes may not hold water anymore because the original reason for applying that customization or the technical barriers or constraints are sometimes lifted or no longer valid as due to the deployment course of adding upgrades, inheriting releases, or applying some of those changes. So rather than take that patchwork approach, that improvised approach, what I wanted to do next was to introduce Jeff Nichols from Iron Mountain to talk us through a little bit more of a methodical approach to taking inventory of your customization and going through that path and studying those and making better decisions. So Jeff, I'd like to introduce you on stage.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming. My name is Jeff Nichols. I'm the Salesforce Architecture Director and Solution Manager on it. I came to Iron Mountain Data Centers, actually, we just recently purchased IO data centers, so most of the stuff that we did was under IO data centers, and so if I get the two confused or start talking back and forth, please forgive me. This just happened a couple months ago. So I came to the data center business 7 years ago. I was brought in to upgrade actually and manage the fully automate the lead contract pipeline in Microsoft Dynamics CRM. I came in and initially upgraded from CRM 4 to CRM 2011. And then we had this standard contract process that we were trying to implement. We had a big meeting one time and the CEO said, I want a customer to come in and do a tour and be able to sign a contract the same day. Now that was kind of an incredible mandate and a little bit high-minded, but what it did is it brought everybody together. So we had formed these groups and we got into multiple stakeholders and what everybody needed to do in order to go all the way from salesperson doing the demo and the walkthrough and the tour of the data center, getting the quote created, off to legal and generating the contract and into delivery, and be able to do that all in one day. So we standardized the contract process and we were pretty successful with that. Then a couple years into it, the company decided to go through a transformation, right? We wanted to become a data-driven enterprise. So we did an evaluation of all of our systems and we realized that we needed to kind of just burn everything down and sort of start over. It was kind of pretty big. During that time, we sort of decided we wanted to go to Salesforce. So we used this Salesforce. It wasn't really necessarily a technical change. It was kind of a cultural change to switch over to Salesforce. So we brought the company together, and then that's when we started establishing governance, right? So we wanted to start putting together the processes to control, change management and do customizations, and you have to have a foundation. If you're going to manage customizations, you have the foundation of what you're doing as a company. So we built out governance. We established RACI, responsible, accountable, consulted and informed. And the key thing there is we were bringing people together and communicating, and we have these large stakeholder groups where everybody participated and had their visibility into what other people's things were. And what we wanted to do was mitigate anything that happened upstream in the sales process, didn't butterfly effect and have downstream, bad consequences. So when you've got, legal sitting in the same room as sales, and then operations, we're all understanding what everybody's things were. So the key is that we brought people together, and we were building good relationships, and that's kind of the foundation to establish, how you're going to manage your customizations. So, we built out this governance plan, and we focused on it. We built our relationships, and then so what we were able to do then is to be able to go through and get engagement from all the different stakeholders and assess what our problems were in an open and honest, manner, and be able to get everybody input into what we needed to do. We also had this concept of we wanted to keep it sort of like, we wanted to do basic blocking and tackling. We didn't want to get overblown with things. We wanted to be sort of as conservative as possible, and we were actually willing to under-automate. One of those risks that Robert was pointing about is over-automation. We're willing to under-automate where we could interject some manual processes into it to understand, to define the real process, okay? So we got into it, which we all want to evaluate. We know what our decisions were. Can we evaluate what we want to do, how we want to get there, and do we need to build or buy a system? So we started evaluating, going through our Salesforce piece, and we know that we needed to get into contract lifecycle management. And so part of the process in that led to us evaluating CPQ. And we've had all our requirements together, and we decided we needed to go with Apttus. So we moved to Apttus, and it was definitely the clear choice. So in order to deploy it, we got back into our assess and evaluate. So we're going to build or we're going to buy. We're going to buy Apttus, right? And so we go through and we figured out all of the different issues. We're going to classify our gaps, and we're going to execute on that. And what we determined is that we would have to extend the system to a certain extent to meet up with the gaps that the software didn't provide us. So we went live with Apttus in 2016. At the same time, we went live with Salesforce. So we brought over our entire Salesforce people from Dynamic CRM into Apttus at the same time. So it was a pretty big move. It's kind of a heavy lift, but because we had established governance, because we had everybody on the same page, we knew what we wanted to do. So what I'm going to show here is some of customizations that we had to do to extend the system. One of the customizations was because we had a business requirement for getting operations approval and for dealing with when we could release the when we could let the approval process go through. Another one was just a customization for a reporting requirement to get some extra fields in there to get other data that we could actually analyze. And then the third one was a customization that started talking about getting into integration. So we had a few things. So a customization to meet a need that was sort of outside what the software could do. We had a customization that met a reporting requirement, and then a customization that was sort of a downstream, sort of looking into integrating further down the road. So all of these customizations were going back to that original sort of standard contract process, and then the controlled approval process, everybody on the same page to mitigate the risk from going from lead to contract. So everything we did was to build for that purpose. So the first piece was this priceless item extension. So we have this concept called the later of in our contracts for the start date, when the contract would start. So a lot of times you can put a start date in, hey, you're going to move in on May 15th, right? But if it takes a couple weeks to do an install or get your equipment ready and everything like that, if you sign the contract on May 14th, there's almost no way that would happen. And that was happening early on in the data center business, right? Wanting to move in on some date, waiting a long time in the customer to do the contract, and then maybe redlining and things like that through the negotiation process that extends it out. So in order to protect that sort of obligation to hit the target date, we had this concept called the later of. So what that was is you would move in on May 15th or the later of May 15th or 15 days after the full execution of the contract. So what's the 15 days? So the 15 days were the lead times allowed for delivering the solution. So we needed this functionality that established lead times on the products so that we knew whether or not if there was cutting it close or if ops would approve shorter lead times or what standard lead times. Again, we built out the standard process so that everything could go through without any approvals, and if you violated those guardrails, then it would require an approval. So the lead times operation approval, we need to be able to put that lead time on the product, and sometimes we even needed to say that no matter what, this product always has to go through ops approval sometimes, and we had to be flexible with it, sometimes based on inventory. If we didn't have any half cabs or we didn't know what our availability for half cabs were, we'd make sure that operations would run through an approval process. So, since we had multiple data centers, we couldn't necessarily put the lead time on a product because our lead times could vary by data center. And since we had price lists by data center, we determined that the best place to put the lead time and to do this customization was at the price list item level. So this wasn't available from out of the box. And at the time, I don't know if it is now or not, so that's the other thing to sort of assess is it in the box? Can I do it? Do I even know everything about how the software works? So you have to have that expertise to know if it's in the box or not. It's kind of interesting. So we figured this was out-of-box capability, so we found a way to extend it. So Apttus, built on Salesforce platform, we were able to easily extend by modifying the price list item, and we added a lead time. So for a cabinet, 15 days, for a circuit, 20 days, for a full module, a pod data center, 30 days. So we built and we worked with operations to build out the lead times. So we had to be able to put the lead times on a priceless item. We had to provide a way for operations to put that data in and keep them engaged in it. And so we did that. So in order to do this, so what we had to meet though, this was to meet a basic business functionality. We couldn't operate. We couldn't run the proposal through any sort of approval process without this piece. So we extended the price list item and we built it out to it. So, and it also left us room for expanding. So just this kind of basic concept, it's always good when you're customizing. If you go down a path that's going to, that you can leverage and use in the future. It's a methodology that you can leverage. So sure enough, later on, initially we had just regular DC operations approval. Then we established we needed to have network operations approval, right? So can we deliver the bandwidth? Can we deliver the peak bandwidth? Can we deliver point-to-point, network transport between data centers? So we were easily able to extend the priceless item data center operations approval to network operations approval. So, and the same team maintains those lead times and whether or not, and we put in some rules too, like if your committed bandwidth exceeded 500 megabits. So we were able to put in parameters that drove the approval process, all at the price list item. So, and it was reusable and not really a one-off. So we did the customization. We planned it out, we prototyped it. Salesforce, one of the things I found that was fantastic moving into Salesforce was the concept of a sandbox. So the sandboxes in Salesforce are like, you can make mistakes, right? So don't be afraid to fail, to try things, to pilot them out, to prototype them in a sandbox. It's okay to fail in a sandbox, right? So we worked it out, we built it, we developed it, we did our standard UAT, we documented the customizations, and then we released this really with our full go-live date, because this was a critical business requirement. We had to have this before we could even deploy Apttus and Salesforce in our big, heavy lift that brought everybody over. So the next piece we did, this was required for forecasting. Everyone's familiar with pipeline opportunity forecasting, and it's always revenue-centric, revenue-driven. But some of the things we needed to forecast as well, or at least have light of, were the number of kW consumed. Again, data centers, power, space, bandwidth. That's basically the product we sell. So we needed to be able to understand what was coming down the pipe from a kW perspective, what was coming down the pipe from a space perspective. It's a very key metric for us in our forecasting and our availability and expansion and things like that. So there's a piece here too that also on top of it, we needed to be able to have the TCV and the MRR, and we didn't have the budget at the time to get into revenue management. So this piece is not only a reporting requirement, but we needed to sort of extend the assets to have these other metadata attached to it, the KW and space, but we also needed to get some rudimentary TCV and MRR tied to it as well, but we didn't have the budget to get into revenue management to get that third leg of the quote to cash. So we had this revenue management. So sometimes there might be a buy option, but sometimes your budget doesn't allow it, right? So we have to do a customization. In those cases, you want to keep your customizations as lean and thin as possible, because someday, if I win my battles in the budget, yearly budgeting, we can get revenue management and tie it in. So we built those additional financial calculations on the asset, but back to the KW and space. So we needed this KW and space both on the pipeline and in the executed contract. So we built out the customizations on the cart line item, and the proposal line item, and the agreement line item, all the way into the asset line item. One of the great things about Apttus CPQ is that if you build out your fields at the lowest level, say at the cart line item, and you keep the field names the same, it rolls up and copies to the proposal line item, and when you create an agreement with line items, it rolls over the agreement line items, and then when you execute and you do your assets, you create your assets on the execution of the quote, it'll roll up into the asset. So we could have this availability, the KW in space, on our pipeline for open pipeline, and then obviously we had it for contracted. So we could always know what our total contracted KW is, our total contracted space, we know what our contracted revenue is, so we're able to take care of all of that. So mostly, I mean, the parts for the MRR and the TCV were sort of an interim solution to extend and get the basic reporting requirements that we needed before we could actually buy revenue management. A little bit of a proof of concept too. So we didn't want to over-customize. We knew that we were going to probably get down to the revenue in the future, get the revenue management piece, but the KW piece was going to stay there for sure. We always take this, like I said before, we weren't afraid to under-automate, so we take a very minimum viable product approach to things. We're very conservative in our customizations. We want to be able to get things out of the box as much as possible, because I don't want to get myself in a box canyon. I don't want to develop and build into something that a new feature may come out in Apttus that handles that. I mean, they're always dealing with new requests. I heard something up to 4,000 new user cases in some of the new products that are coming out. So it's always good also, when you're thinking about customizations, to understand the vendor's roadmap, understand what your capabilities are from a development perspective, know when you can do it in-house, when you can actually contract the vendor and extend it, or push for new features, right? So this piece here was one of those things that kind of tied in with needed reporting requirement, but we also knew it was a potential interim solution from budgetary reasons. So the last piece on the asset lifecycle is we wanted to be able to carry out, so we got into, everything we did, our SKU, like our number of products really decreased when we went into Apttus. We used to have a variety of circuits and 21, I don't know how many people, it gets a little techie, how many people are familiar with data centers. So there's 20, 120, 30, 208, all these different combinations of circuits. And we had about 150 different circuits based on all the possible combinations. But we brought that down just into 2 products, a per KW and then a circuit product, and then we could configure it with a configuration, the attribute groups. On those attribute groups, we also realized that we could start extending some of that metadata and start setting up some integrations downstream. When I started talking to Apttus about what we could do with assets, one of the things that we had immediately, and it was kind of a long vision of mine, was be able to tie this asset, this product that we sold, part of the product life cycle, turning into an asset. But we also wanted to turn it into something that could link to something. Now it's in play. It's a piece in the data center, right? So we use ServiceNow for our service and support, and we have the configuration management database and the configuration items, so we keep track of all of our IT assets that we deliver to customers. So we started thinking we can tie these assets to the CIs in ServiceNow, and we could do that through the metadata, through the attribute groups, and so we started extending that into it. It also allowed us to do some pre-sales configurations. So oftentimes when a customer buys a circuit, they need to know what size plug they're doing, like the 3-prong, the L, or the right, the different orientations and things like that. So we built in, using the attribute groups, the ability to sort of start tagging these things and get ready. So the further upstream you could start configuring things, the more information you'd have with operations at the end for delivery. So a lot of the metadata on our assets that had a big payout at the end. And so we started working on that customization. And again, it was sort of right back to the basic Salesforce platform extensibility, right? I mean, that's the nice thing about, you know, these CRM platform SaaS-based systems is you can really extend them out of the box, really. So we extended it to cover these details, enabling that integration downstream. You know, we also we wanted to be able to make sure, so we're gonna use this to match up that what you actually contract, you deliver. And we want to make sure, and that obviously leads into accurate billing and being able to give the customer, you know, a summary of what their services are. It's amazing, we would go through amendment processes. You know, a customer would change their services, upsell and renew, add and subtract, things like that, but we were never able to give them a running total of what they had. They had no idea. So people would still be scrambling through, you know, hard copy of contracts to see what the services had. But now that we had everything in assets, like in the system, we could actually deliver to the services or deliver all the services to the customer, and they would know what they had. And we could also start validating that with what's actually in the ServiceNow system. And we're still extending this piece. This is like one of our big pushes right now, is just kind of that integration piece, that pass off from Sales Cloud and Apttus into ServiceNow to be able to deliver to the customer. Also, we want to be able to tie in sort of like serial numbers with cabinet and circuit IDs. Oftentimes customers have cabinets and they're spread out all across the data center, and then one opens up next to it, right? So they want to be able to get more contiguous, so they get these ideas. They want to be able to cancel this cabinet over here, and so we could actually start tying into inventory and serial number like they're gonna. So in the contract we can say, we're gonna remove cabinet, you know, SO432-B, and they're gonna buy a new cabinet and gonna be right over next to their other cabinets and their assets. So we're starting to tie into inventory with this, but basically though, the customization was leading to an integration, right? So it's just our ongoing, it was driven by our ongoing need to be data-driven, to integrate with all the systems outside the place, handing off to ServiceNow, actually handing off to billing and revenue management later. These same assets become, you know, that you start tying your billing schedules to, hopefully in the future. So customizations, when they enhance your metadata, they're always good to go, right? They help any bit of all these the talks you've heard today, it's all about data, right? The more data, the more better it is. You can't, if you don't have the data, you can't measure, you know, what your success is or anything like that. So the outcome of our original initiatives, when we sort of refined our governance, we brought everybody together, we got everybody at the same table, was the ability to kind of rapidly work on these things and understand what our requirements were, sort of to back up a little bit out of just these very specific customizations. Again, it's about communicating and understanding and having salespeople walk in legal shoes and legal walk in salespeople's shoes and sales walking in operations and things like that. So understanding, you know, what it is that it takes to make the business run, and get out of that myopic silo-based kind of approach to what I need, and getting user requirements, which are going to drive your customizations. Because you have to have a user requirement. Can I build? Do I have to buy it? What do I have? Is it configurable? What can I do? The other piece that we have going that's helped us through our customizations is that we built this sales operations group. We don't have a director of sales operations. We have a sales operations group. It's a sort of a broad collection of people. It's myself, my CPQ and Salesforce admin, Christine, and then a product management, one of the general counsel, and also a project manager. So we sort of collectively as a group are working together, and we've learned how to work with sales and engage sales to get them to understand what we're looking for. Like, often, how many times have you said, hey, give me your requirements, and sales like, I don't know, I need to sell stuff, right? It's very hard for them to articulate what type of functionality they really need. So what we've been really successful with is engaging them and bringing them in and working through and like taking down and sort of training them how to do a user story, right? Teach them how to do a user story, get them engaged, and then quickly iterate in Sandbox, show them the results of like what they were talking about within a couple days, and they start putting 2 and 2 together, right? And they understand what it is. And so we did that with our director of sales, David Metler. We started working through this whole opportunity management plan, and we brought him into play and really started kind of just, we met him halfway, he met us halfway, and started understanding what it would take. Because again, we have to be able to be engaged with the business, to understand the process, to apply the technology to it, determine, build or buy, customize. So it all starts with understanding the process, and understanding the process all starts with building relations with people so that you can actually communicate and work effectively together and kind of walk in each other's shoes. So some of the fun facts, I guess, from our deployment of Apttus CPQ and contract lifecycle management. We had a huge 99% reduction in SKUs. We took 130 products and turned them into 2 for all of our circuits. We took 25 different bandwidth products and turned them into 1 just by being able to configure. It's interesting because I've heard a lot of people talk about these 1,000-line quotes and very, very large deployments, and I started feeling, wow, we're kind of really small. But what we do is pretty cool. But we're in SKU reduction. We're into like keeping it simple, lowering complexity, reducing friction, right? Getting things just as clean as possible. You know, I can plug a lead into this cache box and I can kick out a contract on the other side and I can deliver down the end. I mean, that piece in the middle, we want as least amount of friction, the best guardrails possible to ensure that we're going to be able to deliver what we promise and to get the return on it. With contract lifecycle management, we had a 5-time reduction in templates. We were doing some homegrown contract lifecycle stuff in dynamic CRM, but we were able to further reduce our templates with just, you know, conditional phrases and clauses and smart fields and all that kind of stuff. And one of the coolest things I think is funny, this is the bragging rights, 99%. In this acquisition, when Iron Mountain purchased IO, which happened in January, it's like, hey, they have Salesforce. They don't use Apttus. What are we going to do? You know, so our sales force and our legal department, our salespeople, every single stakeholder that uses our system is just out there advocating for it. They love it. So like that's the biggest piece of success I think there is, really. The end user bragging for your system and actually fighting for it to keep it in play, understanding that is the right decision and the right functionality for the company moving forward. So that's my favorite stat right there. It was in some of our initial kickoff meetings. It was pretty rewarding to see salespeople and legal people really fighting to keep that system in play. So thank you very much.